fearing the imminent arrival of new criminal charges or a damaging report from Mueller, President Trump appears petrified by what federal investigators could soon reveal. With his fate and that of his family hanging in the balance, Trump today struck out at the special counsel in a lengthy Twitter rant. But in addition to his accustomed smears and innuendo, Trump made some strangely specific yet unsubstantiated claims about Mueller's investigation. Trump tweeted, quote, "The inner workings of the Mueller investigation are a total mess. They have found no collusion and have gone absolutely nuts. They are screaming and shouting at people, horribly threatening them to come up with the answers they want. They are a disgrace to our nation and don't care how many lives they ruin. These are angry people, including the highly conflicted Bob Mueller, who worked for Obama for 8 years." Well, the truth, which the president seemed intentionally to distort there, is that Mueller was appointed FBI director by President George W. Bush in 2001, serving nearly 8 years under Bush before staying on for another 4.5 under Obama as a holdover. Trump then lobbed another bomb, calling the special counsel's prosecutors a gang of Democrat thugs. Well, as the New York Times reports, Trump's rant comes after 3 days of private meetings with his personal lawyers at the White House, where he worked to draft answers to questions posed by the special counsel. And even with his diehard loyalist, Matthew Whitaker, now leading the Department of Justice, Trump appears stricken with fear about Mueller's next move, perhaps for good reason. As Politico reports late today, a deep anxiety has started to set in that Mueller's about to pounce, and that any number of Trump's allies and family members may soon be staring down the barrel of an indictment. In addition to the criminal charges that Jerome Corsi and Roger Stone say they're expecting, Politico reports that the president's own son, Donald Trump Jr., has told friends in recent weeks that he believes he could be indicted. And according to the Washington Post just today, the president is often worried aloud about the possibility that Mueller will seek to indict Trump Jr. as he moves toward the conclusion of his probe. Well, joining me now is Joyce Vance, a federal prosecutor. Peter Maker is chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. And Jonathan Lemire is White House reporter for the Associated Press. Jonathan, what have you got on why Trump is in such an uproar, why he's shooting in every direction, and he seems to be scared?
It's a confluence of events here, Chris. As you know, Robert Mueller publicly remained very quiet in the weeks before the midterms, and the president did too, only tweeting about the special counsel once since Labor Day. That ended today as his frustrations burst out of the scene in that Twitter diatribe that you just quoted from, and it's from a few different things. First, he is sort of dealing with a number of setbacks since the midterm elections. Seemingly by the day, the Democrats pick up another seat in the House. His choice for acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, who he believes will be an ally in pushing back against the Mueller probe, that choice has drawn a lot of heat. We saw a movement in the Senate to try to introduce legislation to protect the special counsel Robert Mueller. And certainly, even though Mueller himself has been quiet, the word around Mueller has picked up. Whispers here in Washington, as you just said, that further indictments could be coming. Two Trump allies, Roger Stone and Jerome Corsi, openly talking about the possibility that they could be indicted. The president is internalizing that coverage, and that comes on the heels of these 3 days he spent here in the White House behind me, preparing for these answers to the written questions from Mueller on collusion. The White House's lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, has said they're not touching the obstruction piece of this, but collusion is very much in the president's mind. And despite counsel from his advisors to keep quiet, to not attack Robert Mueller, that dam broke this morning in a significant way as he unleashed some very personal and inaccurate attacks about Mueller. And that's reflective of the growing sense in Trump world that there could be indictments coming down. And yes, as you said, perhaps not just allies like Stone or Corsi, but members of the president's inner circle and maybe even family.
Thank you very much. Let me go to Joyce. Jess, it seems to me that when he goes personally against the prosecutor, he expects prosecution. So he wants to undermine it, saying he's a Democrat, when the history shows it was George W. Bush who made him FBI director, and he was held over by President Obama. But he's no Democrat. He's no operative, and yet he wants to say he's also in chaos, that he's screaming and shouting. Is Trump projecting what we think is probably going on in the White House, the screaming and the shouting?
It looks like a healthy dose of projection, a healthy dose of wishful thinking, And maybe there's some strategy here. It's really easy to discredit this president as someone who shoots from the hip. You know, we often believe that his Twitter feed is the window into his soul and what his worries of the moment are. But there also seems to be a certain deliberate strategy here of trying to undercut the Mueller investigation. And I suppose if his base is still willing to accept any of the garbage that he spews in these tweets, maybe Mueller will be undercut in their minds. But most of this is made up. Some of it is outright lies, mischaracterizing Mueller as someone who served the Obama administration. He was, as you pointed out, a holdover. My experience, Chris, is that the only people who attack prosecutors and the police are the guilty. If you're innocent, you go in and you tell the truth. You tell your side of the story. But when you're out of strategies to pursue, then you attack the police.
Well, Trump attorney Rudy Giuliani, he's still around, told the Washington Post today that Mueller has posed at least 24 questions to the president about potential collusion, saying, quote, there are some that create more issues for us legally than others, whatever that means. According to the Washington Post, Giuliani said some were unnecessary, some were possible traps, and we might consider some as irrelevant. Peter, obviously, you don't get to choose what questions you answer. This is a take-home exam. They're apparently taking a lot of time with it, 3 days in a row now. What's Trump afraid of in those questions? Can we tell?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I hope someday if I ever get in trouble with a prosecutor, I get to pick and choose which questions I think are relevant. You know, this is a president who has managed to avoid an actual interview in which you have to respond in the moment without the ability to have a lawyer help you write the answers. This is the best way a president could possibly have to respond to questions from a prosecutor, because you do, as you say, a take-home test. You have the books in front of you. You get to consult with your staff and your lawyers about what you have said previously in order to make sure you don't trip over your own past words and have any contradictions. The traps are obvious, though. You know, anything that gets at intent, anything that gets at the idea that he wanted to impede the investigation, that would go to obstruction. Anything that gets at acknowledging knowledge of, for instance, that meeting in Trump Tower that his son and son-in-law and campaign chairman took with Russian visitors offering information on behalf of the Russian government, that would contradict something he said in the past. If they ask him about the statement that he helped draft, that he basically dictated in response to reports about that meeting, that could open up a whole new can of worms. What he doesn't know necessarily is what Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller knows. And so when you answer these questions, you don't want to say anything that will contradict the evidence that already is in the hands of the prosecutors, because then you could get yourself in severe trouble.
Joyce, not everybody, as you know from your experience, has an escape route. I mean, Saddam Hussein ended up hiding in the ground. He didn't have an escape route. Not all bad guys have this plan to get her out of town. And I'm thinking about Trump. He's got the pardon power, which we don't know how limited that is, or unlimited. He's got Whitaker in there as Attorney General. He could possibly stifle any reports or indictments, I guess. What else? He's got a bunch of good lawyers, I think. How does Trump get away with what looks to be coming at him perhaps the next several days or weeks, which is indictments of his family members, indictments of people who will rat him out, like Roger Stone? He could rat him out. He's got all kinds of stuff on him going back for decades. And, of course, you know, impeachment.
You know, Trump's strategy in the most difficult moments of his life has always been to bluster, to hit hard, and to keep on hitting. And maybe that works in a business context. But this is the first time, I think, in Trump's life that he has come up against a criminal investigation. He's had some luck in civil courts. This is Robert Mueller, the former director of the FBI. This is not a group of angry Democrats, but rather a group of very well experienced, very straight up the middle prosecutors who know how to go about their jobs. I don't believe that this group breaks and bends because the president blusters. And sure, he has the pardon power, and he can pardon people who aren't himself, at least to a certain extent. And maybe that gets some of his friends out of trouble. But what he can't do is use the pardon power to keep people, for instance, Roger Stone, from providing prosecutors with evidence against him, from cooperating with prosecutors. Because if he uses the pardon power in that way, it's just an additional layer of obstruction. I don't think Mueller will go after him with kid gloves as regards the president obstructing justice or doing anything that undermines the rule of law.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.